All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nicky are doing a preview and prediction for the Florida-Georgia game going down in Jacksonville on Saturday. 17-point line in favor of the second-ranked Bulldogs, 52.5 to the total, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. Getting things started with the Florida offense. Graham Mertz going down was certainly a big blow for this football team. That officially meant it was the DJ Lagway era for this team from Gainesville, Nick. Obviously he's been pretty good at times this year on the stat sheet, though. Certainly not pretty. 5 touchdowns, 5 picks. But one thing he provides is a 5-star talent. When you have a guy like this, you can win any game. And that includes against Georgia. The thing is that he's been airing it out this year. He only had 7 completions against Kentucky, but for 259 yards, he had 456 on only 18 completions against Samford. I mean, this guy has a massive arm, Nick. It's led to some major big-time plays downfield for the Gators passing attack. And he's had some pretty bad plays as well. It's still a very young quarterback going up against a Georgia defense that just obliterated Quinn Ewers and the Texas offense before the bye week. Certainly going to be a very testy game for Lagway, but again, with the talent that he possesses in a game like this, you always feel like you have a puncher's chance, especially if Eugene Wilson's supposed to be back at full health. You now have a nice dynamic trio of pass catchers. It also includes Shamir Dyke and Elijah Badger. What's your expectations for this Florida passing attack in this game? Because it could be a complete mess where he's just, fooled the entire time against a great scheme, or he could really uncork some cannons and keep him in this ball game.
I think Lagway makes this a totally different game. This is a guy that is a complete and exciting threat for this Florida offense. This is a guy that's really talented and has been plugged in there. We've seen some success. Yes, he only threw 7 passes, but that stat, 250 yards, is very pretty against Kentucky. This is a kid that can air it out. He's got a great deep ball, really solid player. Certainly a turnover is an issue, and Georgia could capitalize on that. They're a team that's been known to force turnovers. He's got 5 picks and 5 touchdowns, 1,000 yards passing, 62% comp rate. But I think he's a guy that you have to scheme for a little bit more. And obviously, Georgia's defense is a really good secondary, but I do think that Lagway's a talented player. I like what he can bring to the table here. I think his skill set's really solid. If his wide receiver room's at full health, it could certainly be a big boost for him. Lagway, I think, is a really exciting player, definitely the future of this program, and a guy here that could change this game a little bit. He's an exciting player, a young player. Certainly got to keep his head on his shoulders. Don't let the moment be too big in Jacksonville, but playing at sort of a 50-50 crowd there. Neutral site certainly helps you a little bit. You're not going to Samford's. That certainly helps me a little bit. But we saw him play pretty solid in Knoxville, other than the 1 turnover. He was having a solid game, including that game tying touchdown that forced it to overtime on that last drive. So Lagway's a good player. He's certainly a solid talent. I think plugging him in here doesn't skip a beat at all for this Florida offense.
Yeah, I mean, Florida was like 1-point underdogs against Kentucky. They beat them by 28. Had almost 500 yards of offense. This Florida football team is playing its best over the last month after an embarrassing start to the year. And you look at the run game, it's going to be hard to run against these guys, but they've been stable this year, and that includes the game against Kentucky, Tennessee, that is, where they had, 3.5 yards per carry. The game against the Wildcats, they had almost 200 yards and 5 touchdowns. They haven't been really held in check other than the A&M game. They've been, again, stable. Montreal Johnson, 373 and 4 scores. Jaden Ball, all 5 of his touchdowns came against Kentucky on top of 106 yards, so he was getting some great goal line work there. And, this is kind of a weaker backfield with the top 2 players they have right there, certainly going to get a lot of work. And, they're good football players at the end of the day, and you just have to be physical, I think, is the way to do it. You're not really going to be able to run the ball against Georgia in any other way. And we've seen Georgia at times this year be vulnerable to physicality. I think they've kind of worked out the kinks, and you're not going to be able to run straight downhill at them. But who knows, Nick? It's college football, and they've had a week off themselves to get ready. So I certainly want to see what kind of wrinkles we have in this offense to get these running backs involved.
We've seen Georgia be vulnerable against the run. Now, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen against this running back room in particular. I do like Montreal Johnson. I think he's a really solid back, 373, 5.3, and 4 scores this season. But, I don't know if he's really going to fit that physical mold. Jaden Ball and Jacoby Jackson are 2 talented backs as well, 8 touchdowns between the 2 of them. Solid numbers, each have 5 yards per carry. So this is a very effective running back room, right? All 3 of the top backs have 5 yards per carry, so they're certainly effective when they run the ball. They're averaging 4.4 yards per carry so far this season, which is a good number, and they have 2.3 rushing touchdowns per season. So certainly they've seen some success on the ground, and Georgia has been weak against the run. Now, I don't necessarily think that Georgia's going to have a bad day against the run. I think they'll have a pretty good day, actually, and that will be ultimately why they win this game. But Florida could potentially have an opportunity to take part of that weakness there. If they can find a way to fire on all cylinders on the ground, it could really be a successful day for this Florida rushing attack.
Yeah, and it'll be, on the shoulders of this offensive line that's been relatively good this year. Austin Barber at left tackle after some early season struggles looking good. Kanijah Harris, I still think, is a high upside left guard, having an average season. Jake Slaughter, a leader, is having a great year at center. Damian George at his right guard spot. He hasn't allowed a sack this year. Then Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon's been phenomenal in pass pro from his right tackle position. So communication will be key between these guys. And, of course, the quarterback. Georgia loves to send random nickel blitzes from nowhere. Blitzes up the middle with stunts and whatnot. So it's going to be a lot to process for an offensive line. I think it's built for a pretty impressive performance. Again, I just want to touch on the receivers. Elijah Badger, almost 24 yards per catch this year. Eugene Wilson, not many numbers because he has been banged up for the most part this year. But he's an athletic demon. I think he's one of the best receivers in football. So Florida has a pretty solid offense with a lot of upside with a 5-star now at quarterback. We move to a Georgia offense that, themselves, it's been kind of shaky because they've not had that dominance in the run game we're accustomed to seeing. They've yet to hit 170 yards in a contest this year. They were pretty good against Texas. They still only had 108 yards on the stat sheet, but they did have 3 scores. Trevor Etienne, interesting game here going up against his former team. You don't transfer from Florida to Georgia, and this is something he's done. So it's a very interesting dynamic there. He's going to be the lead back. Nate Frazier will get some touches here and there. Branson Robinson, he might play, maybe not. Nonetheless, it's going to be the Etienne show in this one, Nick, and that physical dominance. We've just not seen it in the Florida run defense. They've really stepped it up over the last month. So do you think this is another game where they're just, marginally good, or do you think they're going to be overwhelmed, or do you think this will be the game where they finally break out?
This hasn't been the rushing attack that you would hope for Georgia so far this season. 130 yards per game, 1.9 touchdowns, 4.5 yards per carry. You were expecting more of this rushing unit. Etienne, you wanted to see a little bit more of him. 422, 5.1, and 7 scores. Certainly 7 scores is not bad, but below 500 yards rushing so far this season. You wanted to see more from him. I know it's a by-committee approach in Athens typically, but still, Etienne is sort of that talented power back that you wanted to see more of him. Nate Frazier has been okay as well. 5 yards per carry, 204, and a score for him. Robinson's been banged up. He has 3 scores, a bit of a red zone back. You wanted to see more of this rushing attack, right? I've been disappointed so far. Could Etienne have a big breakout day here? Certainly, I think there's an opportunity for him to do so. We saw Tennessee have success running the ball later in the game in that matchup where they beat Florida a couple weeks ago. So that's certainly one of the blueprints you could look at is try and grind down this Florida defense that does show weaknesses later in games. Do Will Etienne have a good day? I don't necessarily think so, but he's got to figure out the rest of the way because they're certainly going to play tougher defenses in the future. I think they'll be fine in this game, but Etienne's performances so far this season have worried me. Going against his former club, I don't think he's going to have a great day either. Certainly a guy you want to keep an eye on in this matchup.
Yeah, I think one thing that's certainly going to be something to notice is if Tate Ratledge plays or not at right guard. He's the leader for this offensive line. I know he wants to play this game. Will he be fully 100%? I'm not sure, but he's going to be a major implementation for this unit if he is back. And I definitely think they'll be a lot better if he is. Center Jared Wilson's been great, taking over that spot. Dylan Fairchild at left guard, phenomenal in pass protection. The 2 tackles, I always harp on this when we talk about Georgia. I just don't think they're all that polished. Xavier Truss and Ernest Green. These guys have been good this year, I guess, but they're certainly prone to give up more pressures than most tackle duos in college football. Hasn't hurt Georgia yet, and Florida, I don't think they have the greatest of heat off the edge, so it probably won't here in this one. But the offensive line, Nick, certainly a little shaky. If they get Ratledge back, though, it's going to be a major deal for this aforementioned run game.
Certainly is going to be a major deal for this run game. They have to find a way to have Ratledge play, I think, in this game. And as the season goes on, you want to make sure he's fully healthy. Losing him has been a big problem. Green and Truss have been very poor for this offensive line. They've been issues. You want to get Ratledge back because he's a big key difference maker for this offensive line. They're not able to run the ball. The offensive line's been weak this year. Georgia's been historically pretty strong on the offensive line, but they sent a lot of guys to the draft recently. It seems like a bit of a turnover year for them. Ratledge's injuries have certainly not helped. You want to see more of this offensive line, and I especially want to see more out of Truss. He's been definitely very shaky, as well as Green. He's been weak on that left side. Concerned about that in this matchup, and concerned about that as the rest of the way the season goes forward for a team that has national title aspirations.
Now we talk about Carson Beck. What an interesting year it's been for him against Alabama. Worst game I've ever seen from him in the first half. Turns it up in the second. They still come up short. Against Auburn, he completed almost 80%. Against Mississippi State, puts up 459 yards. Goes on the road here for a game against Texas and plays another bad game. 175, 3 more interceptions. He's up to 8 now on the season. He's not played good at all on the road this year, and this isn't exactly a road game. It's going to be a split 50-50 right down the middle, though, Nick. So you're not going to have that home field advantage. Beck's just been really shaky this season, not playing up to the standard they should, and I think it's kind of shocking that this is how he's playing without this run game, because obviously they're predicated on, just being, terrorizing opposing man coverage because they have that physical ground game. They have great, play action. They're great on third and long at converting. That's typically what you see in terms of principle for this Georgia passing attack. You're just not seeing it. You're not seeing the same ball placement I think the accuracy at times is a little shaky. And this is a guy who's great velocity who can throw it downfield. And, it's kind of upsetting because Arian Smith's finally healthy this year. He's the leading pass catcher. Dominic Lovett's been a mainstay for them as the number 2. Dylan Bell, that Swiss Army knife, has been really good. Happy with Lawson Lucky's production. This is a passing attack, Nick, that is drastically disappointing. And when they don't have that run game, this is how bad they've been. How can you call this the best team in the country?
Dare I say, Beck is lucky this game is not in the Swamp in Gainesville. That's a very intimidating environment. He's played in 2 intimidating environments so far this season in Austin and Tuscaloosa and had terrible games. 6 picks between those 2 games, 8 on the season total. Beck was certainly not expecting to have anywhere near 8 interceptions this year. He was hoping to be in that 3 to 4 to 5 range. Definitely a lot more than what you would expect out of him. Kind of played himself out of the Heisman conversation with a bad first half of Tuscaloosa and really a bad game against Texas as well. Nearly 2,000 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, 60% comp rate. So, right, those are some solid numbers, but the picks are bad. The accuracy has been an issue at times. The inability to get those big chunk plays has been an issue as well. This passing attack is not firing on all cylinders. I think this Georgia team is certainly vulnerable on offense to having a weak day like we saw in the first half against Tuscaloosa. And really, it was a weak day against Georgia. They did have a good day, or against Texas, that is. They did have a good day running the ball in the red zone, which was a big key in that game. Beck, I'm concerned about him going forward. I think he'll be fine. Like you said, the 50 split will not be the biggest difference in the world. But if this game was in the Swamp, I'd be a totally different story. I'd be saying, you'd be sweating if you're a Georgia fan because Beck has really not handled the loud environments well. It seems to be a major weakness for him, and it's hard to kind of figure out exactly what is transpiring there, what's going on there, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on as the season goes on.
38% conversion, third down rate this year. It's not really good. Georgia's always north of 50, and, that's certainly been a big problem for them, especially against the best opponents they've faced. They've not been good on third down. Moving to the Florida defense they'll be facing off against. This is a team, it was awful early on in the season on defense. Last 4 games, they've really stepped up. 480 is what Mississippi State had playing from behind the entire game. Other than that, though, they've allowed 312 yards or less. That includes against Tennessee, held a shaky UCF offense in check. That's a run game that can burn you if you don't show up. And then Kentucky's just an abysmal mess. But they still have playmakers as well that can hurt you if you don't show up. And that's what we saw early on in the year, Nick. Florida just not showing up, not playing really with a care in the world. And just seeing guys run wide open, for example, in the secondary. We'll focus on the D-line, though. Caleb Banks, I think he's a great player for them on the interior. George Gums has been emergence off the edge. Cameron Jackson, him and Banks, they provide some legitimate size on the interior. I think they're really good. Tyreek Sapp, TJ Searcy. Florida's legitimately about 9 or 10 deep on this D-line, Nick. And, the guy who gets the fewest snaps would be a 5-star in LJ McCray. So there's a lot of playing time here being spread around. They have some nice depth I'm pretty happy with. The run defense really has taken shape, though. Again, early on in the season, they were no good. Last couple of games, though, they've really shored this part of their defense up, and they're playing really tough against the run. And this game's going to mean a lot for them, so I don't anticipate them getting shredded by any means. This will be a competitive matchup in the trenches.
This will be a tough matchup in the trenches, but a competitive one. I think they have an opportunity to have some success in the trenches. This is a unit that's getting better as season goes on. I've been impressed with some of the way that things have turned around here. I think TJ Searcy is a really talented player. 20 total tackles, a sack for him. Cameron James, 16 total tackles. Desmond Watson, 11 total tackles for him as well. So they're certainly getting some nice production. Tyreek Sapp has been solid at times for this team. It's more of a rotational piece. Sapp 25. Or more rotation of defensive pieces. Sapp has 25 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. He's looked really good so far this season. I like the production they're getting. Him, Cam Jackson, Caleb Banks have been solid pieces for this team as well. Banks with 13 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and a sack. This is a unit that's getting better as season goes on. They certainly have a tough task here at times, or on paper that is, but the Georgia rushing attack has not been great this year. Can they plug those holes? Can they put some pressure on Beck? I think it's certainly possible.
You look at the middle of their defense, big criticism we had coming into the season was how bad these linebackers were for Florida, but we felt Ron Roberts would come over and really, help elevate the play, and he has tremendously. Shamar James, the leader of this defense, having a good year. Grayson Howard really wasn't that good at South Carolina. He's having a phenomenal season. Only 1 missed tackle. He's been great against the run. Jaden Robinson as well. Obviously, this is going to be one of the toughest tests they have saw all season. They faced a bit of a complex scheme in Tennessee, and I think for the most part they passed the challenge. Still 143 yards and 3 scores allowed, but that was on over 40 attempts. So these linebackers are much more in sync. In Florida, again, talking on the D line. Billy Napier's heavily recruited that position, and those are some high-end talents that are up there stepping up for them. These linebackers are some underrated ones as well. This is an opportunity for them to really, make claim to how good they've improved. I think they can be enforcers in this game. And overall, it's a Florida front seven I think is pretty, impressive, and I think it's one that's underrated coming into this game.
I think it's the key to this game. Can this front seven be strong, get some tackles for loss, cause some headaches for this Georgia offense? I think it's possible. Grayson Howard, 33 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, plus a sack for him. Shamar James, 32 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. Jaden Robinson, 32 total tackles, 1.5 sacks for him. George Gums, 21 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and a pass breakup. Production out of these linebackers has been solid. I like the way they set this unit up. I think this is a good defensive scheme they run here with this 3-3-5. I like what they have in the middle there. A solid unit overall. I do like these linebackers in this front seven as a total.
Now you look at this Florida secondary. They've really settled down the last 3 weeks, allowing 165 yards twice. Then only 169 to Tennessee, a game that lasted more than 4 quarters, snagging a total of 5 interceptions and only allowing 1 TD during that stretch. So this is an impressive Florida secondary, and we talked about how they're going up against a quarterback who's been very shaky, has not been very accurate and great with his ball placement. This is a secondary, though, that has been prone to allowing guys, again, to be wide open, and I think they've certainly put that behind them, but discipline's still a bit of an issue with this team. I think Jason Marshall's having a much improved year. Him and Devin Moore thought would be a very good cornerback duo this year, and they're having a solid season. Dijon Johnson, the number 3 corner, gets on field. He's also been quite sound himself, in the slot. Shafai Denson, guy they can probably pick on. Aaron Gates. It's not really a polished position for them by any means. At the safety spot, Jordan Castell, I still think this is a big impact playmaker for them. He's not been good in coverage. He's been their worst coverage player. Him and DJ Douglas, this free safety spot has certainly been a big vulnerability for them. Triquez Bridges at times has played better for them, but he doesn't see as much time because he's not as sound as a tackler or as great as a playmaker as Castell, even though I think he'll probably see a long leash in a game like this. There's a secondary, Nick, that has improved. They have to stay that way. You can't let guys be wide open. Georgia, if they're able to operate as a quick strike offense, Florida's going to lose this game badly. Secondary has to continue to showcase those improvements.
Secondary has to be strong in this game. I think there certainly is an opportunity they can be able to do that. I do like a lot of the pieces that they have on this secondary. Triquez Bridges has been good, 34 total tackles, a pick, 2 pass breakups. Jordan Castell has been solid in coverage, 33 total tackles, a sack, and 4 pass breakups. Sharif Denson's been good, 20 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for a sack, plus a pick and a pass breakup. Jason Marshall, 4 pass breakups, 20 total tackles for him. DJ Douglas, 17 total tackles. Devin Moore, 15 plus a pick and 2 pass breakups, while Gates and Johnson each have 10 tackles, while Gates has 2 pass breakups and 3 tackles for loss. Overall, I like this defensive unit. I think this is an underrated defensive unit that's getting better as the season goes on. There's developing in the trenches. Their secondary needs to be focused here because this Georgia offense can certainly hit you and pick you apart downfield. We've seen Beck put up a lot of numbers in some of these games while having a lackluster game. In other games, they got to be on their point here. This has to be a very strong secondary unit. They got to be good here if they want to win this game or be competitive in this game, that is.
Now we move to a Georgia defense coming off its best effort of the year, probably the most impressive of the season, flat out overwhelmed what a lot of people consider to be the best offensive line in the country after some pretty shaky performances throughout the season leading up to that. You look at this D-line, Tyron Ingram Dawkins, this guy has been phenomenal. Nazir Stackhouse, him and Christian Miller on the interior, very good at pinching gaps. Warren Brinson as well whenever he's healthy. Michael Williams probably won't be 100% for this game, but he's a guy that was disruptive against Texas. This is Chaz Chambliss has also been a highly improved run defender. Damon Wilson gets on the field and he's an impact player for them. This is a D-line that certainly doesn't have that first-round talent, like they had 3 of them a couple years ago. But these are all still highly regarded football players that, understand the principles of this defense. They play with physicality. There's some of them are pretty productive as well, including Ingram Dawkins of 8 TFL and 29 rushing yards. They held Texas to. They were able to get in the backfield 10 times for a season high TFL mark. This is a team that came alive against Texas. Can they, keep that energy throughout the bye week into this game?
I think it's possible. This is a strong defensive unit that's having a bit of a down year compared to previous years in Athens. Obviously, it's a very high bar they set down there in Athens. We've seen this unit struggle against the run this year, uncharacteristically giving up more than 100 yards per game, which, doesn't sound like a lot, but for Georgia, giving up more than 100 yards per game is a lot. Chaz Chambliss has been good, 18 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, plus a sack. Christian Miller, 13 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, plus a sack. Tyrone Ingram Dawkins has been really good, 12 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Great numbers for him there. Stackhouse has 12 total tackles as he's a good run clogger. Damon Wilson, 11 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack. Michael Williams, not been great this year, but still 6 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Warren Brinson has 4 total tackles. Want to see more out of him. This is a unit that certainly can do more, and this is a test where they may get tested a little bit. Florida may try to run the ball early here. I like the matchup potential because this is a unit that is rounding into form. Been disappointed, but I think this is a unit that's getting better as the season goes on. This defensive line's got to be strong here. Got to stay focused because Florida can run the ball if they have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, they were poor from teams just running straight downhill at them, nothing fancy, and they just weren't fully passing the test in terms of toughness. Look at the middle of their defense. This is a great unit, elite talent here, probably the best in the country. C.J. Allen's been a great run defender, nice tackler, less than stellar in coverage, though. Same goes for Raylan Wilson. So that's why the return of Smail Munden is, very important for this defense. He's been sound in all regards this year, only playing in 4 games, though. You're hoping his health can be at a premium in this game. I think Jalen Walker's the best of the bunch just because he's super athletic. Probably isn't the most polished run defender, but he's a guy they can send off the edge a lot. He's a nice pass rusher. He's a guy they usually use as a spy as well. He's just tremendous speed. Jalen Walker, phenomenal linebacker for them. Great group here. DJ Lagway probably not going to be the biggest threat to run, Nick, so you need to lean on him as a spy, and he can be more of an edge rusher in this game where he can thrive. How do you think this pass rush will do after a monster game against Texas?
This is a unit, certainly a linebacking unit that has some really talented pieces that do play a huge role in this pass rush. Smail Munden, C.J. Allen are 2 key pieces. Allen, 33 total tackles. Munden, 17 total tackles plus 2 pass breakups. I do like what they've been able to do so far this season. Jalen Walker, Raylan Wilson are also involved as well. They're 2 key pieces, especially Walker, right? The 30 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks for Walker. Big numbers there. Certainly a big key piece of this defense. Can he have a good day here? I certainly think so. I like, Wilson to be involved as well and have a decent day for this defense. He's got 5 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. This linebacker unit's got to be good. If they run the ball, they got to be able to, to attack Lagway, try to get a pick, maybe be strong in the middle. I think it's certainly possible they can do that.
Now you look at the secondary for Georgia. Starting with the corners, Dalen Everett and Julian Humphrey, they're going to get, a very long leash in this game. They've played a lot of reps this year. Everett's really not been that good in coverage. Humphrey's been a little bit better. Neither of them are exactly standouts so far, and I think that Georgia, just with the way they scheme things up front, is why they were able to not get beat so bad in the secondary. That's why you've seen Texas, kind of struggle to have success. But these corners, I think, can certainly be vulnerable. Jonel Aguero, a pretty aggressive player. It's gotten better as the seasons went on in the slot. Of course, Malachi Starks at safety is a tremendous player. He's going to be elite in coverage of his range. He's got a nice downhill trigger against the run. I think Dan Jackson's been the most splendid of the bunch. I didn't really think he's all that skilled in coverage, but this year he's really showcasing nice improvements. On the other hand, he doesn't provide much against the run, but he is a nice, efficient tackler. KJ Bolden got on the field a good bit last game. He was also showcasing some impressive moves for a 5-star true freshman. So this is a secondary. It's absolutely loaded with talent. These corners so far this Nick haven't really blown you out of the water. They're not going to probably leave him in man too often. But these are some nice skilled receivers they're going up against, and the big play could be waiting to happen.
The big play is certainly be waiting to happen. This is a secondary that is a solid unit. Again, at Georgia, they recruit tons of 5-stars. These are very talented players, but they haven't been playing phenomenal this year at times. They're certainly a little vulnerable in one-on-one play. Malachi Starks, leads the team in tackles, very technically sound tackler. 39 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a pick. Dan Jackson, 37 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, a pick, 2 pass breakups. Dylan Everett, 29 total tackles for him, plus a sack this season, plus a pick and a pass breakup. KJ Bolden's been really good as a freshman, 24 total tackles, a sack, and a pick for him. Aguero has been solid, 19 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and Julian Humphrey has 8 total tackles as well. So this has been a defense that has been productive, not quite up to the Georgia standard here. Lagway does provide a unique threat, certainly, but I think this is a unit that can still stand up, be a very strong unit, and get the job done in the end for this Florida team, or Georgia team that is, sorry, late night recording session here. But overall, I do like what this Georgia defense can do. They're a very strong unit on paper, and they should be in line for a strong day.
I don't anticipate them to play too much man coverage. I think it'll be a nice blend of both, though, to kind of counter what I said earlier. These corners will certainly be tested if that's the option they tend to roll with. Look at the tail of the tape, the team comparisons. I mean, Georgia, top to bottom, I think great receivers for Florida might be able to potentially work their way into an edge in this potential game. Anywhere else, though, I don't really think there's anywhere you can make an argument for.
I think so as well. This is a very clear dominant for Georgia. This team is very much better than Florida on paper. They have a really talented roster top to bottom. Florida has been punching above their weight, and this team is certainly playing better, and it may save Billy Napier's job, but it's very clear that UGA has the advantages across the board here.
Looking at the final thoughts and the prediction, I think the biggest keys to the game for Florida, the defensive improvements must remain. You got to be good against the run and stop getting beat against the pass, and that's what they've shown the last 3 weeks. So you certainly got to be able to continue to be showcasing those improvements at least 80% of the time. Don't allow the receivers to be wide open, And Lagway need to play calm and collected. I think if he can do that, they can hang in this game. Remember a couple years ago, it was going to be 3-0 at half, and Anthony Richardson gifted them 21 points. Game was over in a blink of an eye. For Georgia, continue to showcase the dominance in the trenches, and of course, pressure DJ often. And that's what you saw against Texas, Nick, was Georgia just overwhelmed Texas tremendously. And we thought that they were incredibly built for that. And I don't think Florida is as built as Texas is by any means. This is an interesting rivalry because it's really never a good game. I never go to it, even though I'm right down the road, Nick, because the final result is never a single-digit score. I think Florida, for the first half, they're going to hang around. I think they're going to make some big plays. I think as Georgia settles in, though, they're going to start to expose Florida in some of their weaknesses. As much as I want this game to be close, and I think it can because they do have that great equalizer in Lagway, I think they're significantly improved in the trenches as well. I just don't know if they can, fend off what the Bulldogs have working for them right now. And that's, everyone's against them right now because of how much they've been doubted. And I don't think that Georgia lost that just because of a bye week.
I think you're right when you look at your assessment there. These games have not been close. The last 4 years, the winner has won by at least 16 points, and Georgia has won 3 of those 4 games, winning 4 out of the last 5, with a lone win for Florida coming in 2020 when they ended up winning the East in a really solid year for them during the COVID year. I think the line is wide, right? 17 points. I think Florida can barely cover that because I do think Florida has a really unique aspect with DJ Lagway, who will be a big difference maker in this game. I think it will be close early on, and ultimately Georgia will pull away and get the job done. I could certainly see this being a lopsided victory in favor of the Bulldogs, because the Bulldogs are just a better team on paper. I don't think Florida wins this game. I don't think there's really a chance they win this game. I think it can be competitive in the first half before they really do start to lose it, like we've seen in a couple of these contests over the last couple of years or so, like you alluded to earlier about the game with AR-15, who made a bunch of mistakes in that one. I'd like to see a close game here. I certainly like to see Florida punch, and we've seen Florida punch above their weight and sort of save Billy Napier's job. They kept it close with Tennessee. They've kept it close to some of the other opponents on their schedule, certainly as of late, and they beat Kentucky by a large margin just 2 weeks ago. So I think it's certainly possible that they keep this game closer. Why I think they'll cover the 17 point spread. I think that's a lofty spread. Don't think they'll be able to win this game. Don't think they have any sort of chance of winning this game. I hope they keep it close. I'd like to see a nice close rivalry game here, but overall Georgia's the better team on paper, better team pound for pound, and they're going to be easily able to win this game and move on and continue to push towards competing for a college football playoff spot and winning the SEC.
Yeah, certainly plenty of intrigue to this one. I just think Billy Napier, I think especially in last year's game, he made some boneheaded decisions and just gifted Georgia opportunities, and that's what you can't do. And I just don't think that Napier can coach a perfect game ever in his life. That's going to be what it comes down to. But Lagway and his big arm certainly gives you a puncher's chance. So I think this game has plenty of intrigue, more than it had at the beginning of the year. That'll be it for today's episode. Nick, final thoughts?
Yeah, looking forward to this one. I think there is some intrigue in this game because Lagway is a bit of a difference maker. I don't think Billy Napier is a great coach, but I think he may have cooled his seat a lot with recent results. And if he can certainly keep this a one-score game for most of it, he will cool his seat even more and give himself that extra security that he's really not had at all during his tenure in Gainesville.
Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.